name is Lynn Corm. I'm your host today, and today our guest is Allison Villars. And Allison has been here before, talking about youth services, but she's also a professional career counselor and would like to share with the community some ideas of thinking about futures and careers and what we're doing with our lives. So Allison, thank you for sharing this information. I think people will find this fascinating.
Well, I'll tell you my story of how I got to be a career counselor, because it's a career story, and that's what I have dealt with over probably 20-something years in career work. I was an undergraduate at a state school, and I majored in history, I think, my first semester. Anyway, every semester I changed my major. And
so you were on more than the 4-year plan.
No,
like.
Actually I graduated in May of the end of my 4th year. But my advisor, who was a historian, a faculty member on campus, would see me come in every semester and he'd go, oh, here she comes again. And I would say, I don't want to major in that, and I would change my major. So I was a history major, I was an English major, I was a public service major. I mean, I was a little bit of everything. And in my senior year, I went to him and said, I really have to choose something. And so we laid out the curriculum of the school, every curriculum they had, and he had my transcripts, and he would call out what courses I had taken. I would check it off on all these curriculum to find out which one I could graduate in by May.
Yeah.
My mother is a school teacher and told me not to be a school teacher. She said, don't be a school teacher, do something else. And what I wound up majoring in was secondary education. So I graduated the May of that year after changing majors 8 times in secondary social studies and English education. And I did my student teaching, and I decided during my student teaching that there's no way I was going to be a teacher. I wasn't cut out for that. And I decided I needed to go on to graduate school. And what I wanted to be was, at that point, I wanted to be what's now called an associate dean of students, the female version on a college campus working with young women on a college campus. And out of my graduate program in counseling, I got a degree and went to my first job at a liberal arts college in a cornfield in Missouri, and was their assistant dean of students, and I was in charge of residential life and all the women's and student activities programs on campus. And the one thing that these 600 liberal arts graduates wanted was help deciding, what do I do with the rest of my life? What do I major in? So I'm a chemistry major and I have a liberal arts degree. What do I do with it when I leave? I'm a music major, I'm a theater major, I'm a math major, I'm a historian. What do I do when I graduate?
How do you apply this education?
Right. So as an assistant dean, I said, well, we don't have anything that helps them do this. Let me figure this out. And in my master's program, I had taken a course called Occupational and Educational Information, which was as deep as career field went at that point in time. So I got some other education, and I studied with 2 of the best people on the planet, a guy named John Crystal, who's the father of skills identification in the United States, and a guy named Richard Bowles, who wrote a famous book that's published every year called What Color Is Your Parachute? And it is the very best manual for a person wanting to work through career issues on their own. So I would highly recommend.
And what's the author of that particular book again?
Richard Bowles, B-O-L-L-E-S. What Color Is Your Parachute? So I went to a workshop that they had for over 2 days, and I learned stuff, and I came back and started a program called Self-Knowledge Identification and Planning on this liberal arts campus. And it was the first of 4 career centers I set up on university and college campuses in the United States.
That's a job and a half. But tell us what all we need to know. I mean, because parents, we have career counselors at the and guidance counselors. I don't know if they want to be called that anymore. They're counselors of some sort. They changed their name at the high school, at the career center level, and counselors even at the elementary level. I think some of the schools have counselors. And they do a myriad of things, but some parents feel like they need more. What should we do?
Well, there are several myths about career planning and career work that I'd like to make sure that, in general, parents know in relation to their children, and that youth growing up know, and that children learn as they move through their lives. And one of them is that there is such a thing as deciding one time what to do. There isn't. And the way I can prove that to people is I say, when I have somebody come to see me as a career counselor, I say, bring pictures of yourself when you were a little person, like a toddler or an elementary school person. Bring one when you were middle school or high school. Bring one when you were college, and bring one as a young adult, depending upon what age they are. And we compare those pictures, and they all look different. The person never looks ideal. Like if they brought a 5-year-old picture, they don't look 5 when they're 15. And I say, so why is it that and you didn't do the same things at those ages.
Right.
Our culture, our Western culture, actually all over the planet, has produced an outcome that we really don't want, which is you choose one time. The fact of the matter is you can't just choose one time who you are on the planet, because you change as a person. Your priorities change. So if one day you're a parent, you're an adult on the planet and you don't have children, and the next day you're an adult on the planet and do have children, your priorities have shifted. They might have shifted based upon you doing work for a nonprofit organization and making very little money, as opposed to now having these children and deciding you need to make more money to make sure that they have all of the things that you didn't have when you were a child, or get them into college.
Just get them in.
Yeah, you decide that you're going to have to go out and figure out how to make more money, so that becomes a higher priority. So you change your career or your job in order to get what you need for you and your family. So we're never, it's never an isolated event. It's a series of events. Career development is a process. It's not a decision. And so that's number one. And you're going to make these processes over and over and over and over again. And we know statistically that people are changing jobs anywhere from 3 to 12 times in a lifespan, many more than that, most of us. And then they're changing careers anywhere from 6 to 9 times. And that career means either a change in the function of work, like I'm doing accounting, or I'm doing inventory control, or I'm doing insurance. So that's the function of a job. Or they're changing the venue in terms of the kind of work that they do. So they might work in a grocery warehouse. And so they're in retail, wholesale, or they're in retail, or they're in healthcare. So
and each one of those is considered a change in occupation.
Yes. So either the function of work, or the venue, the industry that you do it in, or both. Some people change them simultaneously, which is the most comprehensive career change.
Now, career change, though, from what you're saying is, a lot of people will start at a job when they don't have huge responsibilities, like they don't have a house or kids or anything like that. And they may stay with that same company or in that same field,
right,
but they'll get an education where they become not a worker, but a manager,
right,
or some kind of a supervisor. And through experience all the way up, you do change your career.
You can.
But that used to be viewed as climbing the ladder. Is that the same as changing? When I think of changing careers, I'm thinking of you were a scientist, and then you decide to be a plumber, and then you decide to be an electrician, and then you decide, that. So I'm flipping further, I think.
Right. There are elements of career change, and it starts from changes in job, which is what you're talking about. So a person is in an industry, say they're in the healthcare industry, and they start off as let's go there. They're in the cafeteria and they're a worker there, and they meet people who are doing mammographies, and they're wondering, how does one get educated to do that? And that sounds like a good job, and I'm really good with people, and maybe that's something I could look at. And so they look at the requirements of that, and then they move in it. Depending upon who you are, you might consider that a change of career, or you might consider that a stepping stone in the same industry. But it really depends upon how the person, him or herself, views that change. And so it can be a very significant change, or it can be a relatively insignificant change. But to that person, even a change of job can be the most horrendous thing ever to consider. It could be from one job as an accountant here to another job as an accountant, a lateral move, and it's still a big deal for that particular person. So it's really the view of the person who is about the intensity of the change themselves. And so what a career counselor would do is take you where you are and say, what is it that you want to have happen, and then help you make that transition.
Suppose someone comes to you and says what they want to have happen is they want to double their salary. You put that into the mix and say, okay, what are you doing now, and how do you get there? You help them figure out how to get that done.
Exactly, if that's the highest priority. What people find out is that there are other priorities also that are competing as well.
Time.
Time, you know, the education required to make that kind of shift and the time away from work to get that education potentially, or skill building, and they really don't want to build those kinds of skills, or they like the technical work they're doing and they don't want to move into management, whereas the additional money might be there. So they're having to make all of these competing choices. And one of the other myths about career planning, besides it's one-time decision, which it isn't, it's a process. And you'll meet yourself at different points along this process as you grow and develop as a human being on the planet, and your priorities shift and change. All of that's there. Another is that it's not that you're just not the same person that you were 5 years ago or based upon this life experience, but you are, the meaning and the purpose has changed. So in the younger part of a life, sometimes it's about building competency. It's just about proving oneself that I'm able to do this. And then in another part of your life, it's about meaning. And sometimes they're the same, and sometimes they're very different. And so you can witness the increase of people over 50 going into the Peace Corps. You know, that has increased remarkably as the baby boom generation has hit that age. And those people are really heading off for looking at meaning. So people will say, you know, I'm really a good whatever. I'm really a good chef. You know, I've been a great chef. I have a 5-star restaurant or whatever. People like my food, and I'm a great caterer. But, you know, that's not meaningful to me anymore. I'm really, you know, I want to do something.
I climbed that ladder and I succeeded there. I want to try something else.
That's possible, and that's one of the things. But philosophically, that they want to have more impact in the world. They want to deal, and sometimes based upon their life experience. I mean, look at these people who have had a child go missing and then formed this big, you know, missing children's thing.
Yes.
Based upon a life experience, they're going to change their whole life.
Yeah.
So all of our life experience intervenes, and as those intervene for us, we need to take. So part of it is about skill building and competencies, and that's usually the first part of a career. At some point, people sort of almost magically shift to meaning. Sometimes that can be the same thing in the job, and they just have to see it differently. Other times they have to tweak the job, and other times they have to move on to a new field.
What else? Okay, career counseling. Should we know?
Everybody has skills.
Okay.
And when people come to me and say, well, I don't have any skills, and I can't identify my skills, and I don't know what my skills are, or I don't know what direction I want to head, or I don't really know what I like at work,
how do you narrow that down?
Yeah, I can help them go back to looking at what their skills are, and every 17 or 18-year-old on our planet is going to have about 700 usable skills. They're not going to be able to name more than 10 with any kind of certainty and with any dialogue about them, a lot of language about them. But they're going to be able to, and what we want to do is get to the 10 to 25 they really love. Because skills can be those skills that we're good at and we don't really care about. Like, I'm good at math. I don't really care about math. You know, it's not something that turns me on, where other people are fascinated by it, you know, and just drawn into it. I can read financial statements, I can do budgets, I can do all that kind of stuff. But as the focus of my life's work, that's not who I am on the planet. I'm much more about people and having them get what they want at work and finding their life's mission and making that happen. And they can do that in a job that they have, or they can do that in their family life, or they can do that by resetting priorities. So skills are really an important piece of this puzzle. There are 13 major pieces. Skills is one of the core elements of that. And so I can have somebody coming to me and say, Alison, I'm really interested in education, and I really love teaching. I'm a really skillful teacher. Does that mean that they're going to go into education? I would say no, because there are other things to look at as well. They're going to tell me that potentially my personality is really argumentative. You know, I like to take an argument all the way through. I like to prove a point. I like to do the research behind it. So that's a personality dynamic. So personality is going to be an important piece. And then maybe their interest patterns is, you know, I'm always fascinated about medical malpractice. How is it possible that a sponge can get left in a person after surgery? So that's an interest area. So those are 3 core elements of a career decision. Skills, what you're really good at and what you're innately interested in doing well, and you know,
it just comes naturally to you.
It comes naturally. It's an innate talent and such. And then personality, which is, what is your personality, and how does it affect the world, get acted out in the world, and what's natural to you there. And the third is related to interest patterns. And so if I have a client expressing all of those things, our culture would tell them pick between them, education, law, or medicine. And my philosophy and good career counselors are going to say, how do you combine those things? How do you get all of that or most of that in a career choice? And that's the very best career development ever gets, is looking at the whole person and the person looking at themselves and saying, how do I make these things fit together? I can give you an example.
Go ahead. That'd be good.
The actual scenario I just told you about happened probably 15 years ago in a way distant place with a way distant person. And that's an actual case. The person loved teaching, loved the law in terms of the argument that went behind it, and then loved medical malpractice. Now, you would say, and there are other things that person needed to know about their life. But if you look at that person came to a place where he had to make a decision about what to do. So if you went on what the culture teaches us, you would choose between those fields and have one as the primary. But what he did was look at who he was and all the other pieces of himself, and he came up with like 15 possibilities, one of which was being a radio talk show host. And so what he could do is teach the public on the radio. He could argue with people on the radio about medical malpractice issues from a perspective of the doctors and the medical point of view and the people who were people trying to learn about this particular kind of thing. And he put together these shows and he is syndicated.
Really?
Yeah. So, but he had like 10 or 15 other possibilities.
Well, he could have been a law professor.
He could have been a law professor specializing in medical malpractice. He had all of those kinds of traditional things together, but those he didn't want to leave anything out, and this was the place that he got most excited. If you're really excited about your work, then you know you're doing something that's really empowering not just yourself, but actually creating a platform for other people to step out on. Mm-hmm. You know, so you have Oprah Winfrey possibly, and you know she's created this thing, and other people have stepped up to their career potential based upon her having put out these programs,
in this area.
And she's succeeded in this area. And so other people are saying, well, you know, she's telling me that I can do what I want to do, and you know, in these positive kinds of programs. And so she sets up a place for other people to step up to be more of themselves.
I think too, what you're talking about too is realizing that there are jobs to be created just by ideas.
Exactly. And it can be something that already exists. You don't have to go out there and create your own thing. I had a client once. He was an engineer, and he was doing traditional mechanical engineering. But what he liked and he learned, and this is one of the things parents can pay attention to, as a young child, he was fascinated by light. It was the most fascinating thing to him. He always loved to take pictures. He didn't know why. He didn't know how he would use it. He moved away from it when he got to college. But he always liked looking at engineering diagrams and those kinds of things. And when he put this into the scope of all the other pieces of himself that we discovered in this process of career development, he said, I know what I want to do. I want to look at those pictures of the moon and of all these other planets, and I want to be able to find out what those shadows are. And so he then started studying a whole new field for himself and went into work with NASA, and that's the kind of work he's doing today. So sometimes it's going back and rediscovering things that we know about ourselves but haven't put into any kind of perspective. And something as small as light in our lives as a fascination is what would drive career choice and behavior.
And I think it's hard as an individual by yourself to discover that. You really need someone who's outside of you, like a counselor, asking questions and directing your thought process. Right. Do you find that true?
I think some people need that kind of help. I think other people, when they understand, like other people can work through the book, and I don't get any royalties on this, by the way. Richard Bowles' book, What Colors Your Parachute, and they can do all the work themselves, and some people can do that. But I've had people hire me just to sit with them while they did the work because they were not going to do it by themselves. I mean, they just at that point in their life, they just couldn't make it happen for them. So everybody's different. I think you can do it with a group of friends. I don't think you have to have a professional do it. I think you can work through all of this kind of stuff. It's the very best framework I know for the most people to use that's going to really help them get at the pieces that they need to incorporate if they're going to look at combining. The people I know who've gone through this process have done remarkable things in their lives and are very happy. And once you learn the process, that decision isn't forever decision either. They can use that same process once they learn it. And the number one things adults have told me when I have seen adults over time is, why didn't anyone ever teach me how to do this?
Well, what can we tell our youth, since you're counseling, but youth are important, and for parents to help guide children in this process? What steps should they take?
Well, for parents of very young children, write down how they spend their time. Write down their fascination. So I know a parent recently that I saw with a young child, probably 3 or 4 years old, and it was a young boy child. And every single time in Amy's that the train passed by, this child was like a bullet to the window and was looking at that train. Now that seems insignificant to most people.
Well, a lot of children like trains, though, too.
A lot of children like trains, so you're going to do this. But every single time this child sees this, he's enamored of it. He also likes big equipment, come to find out, talking to the parents, and every single time he sees the fire engine pass or a backhoe or something like that, this is where his time and attention is spent. And that's what he plays with as toys, and that's the books he reads about. So it takes on more than just a passing interest. This is over a span of time. So as a parent, write that down. If your child is always outside building tree forts, looking at trees, collecting leaves, trying to figure out what that is, growing things, digging in the dirt, whatever that is, write that down. Parents get scared about this kind of stuff when I talk to them about it. And part of it is because they want their kids to go to college, and they want them to get this big job. And what one parent might think, and I'm not saying this parent thought that at all, is that, oh, he's going to be a heavy equipment operator. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but this parent said, they wanted him to be a doctor or something like this. I'm going, he could be a metallurgical engineer.
Yeah.
And be studying new metals to build lighter equipment that are going to lift heavier kinds of things. So there's lots of ways in which people can use these things. But in our culture, we start making assumptions, like artists can't make money.
Yeah.
If you go into art. Well, I can tell you, for every artist you can show me who can't make money, I can show you somebody who does make a significant, meaningful livelihood around the arts. So do we say don't do that because money's not easily there? If you're passionate about something, you're going to drive that.
That's the key. That's the key.
So for youth and parents, look for passion. And when you have passion and you have something that feels easy to you, then pay attention to it.
And so the parent would take notes about all the way from a child little and up, and then when a child gets to the point of 18, 20 years old or whatever, when they want to sort of figure out where they are, these notes can come.
Right, and all along, so a collection of these kinds of things. I mean, when I was a kid, I was putting on spring flings, like a fair in our backyard.
Organizing parties.
I was organizing things. And, charging parents money to come to see their kids swing on the monkey bars, that kind of thing. So collecting that kind of data and understanding that data will be meaningful and purposeful to this person when they can't remember how they spent their time as a young kid, and reminding them, well, you used to do that. The people seem to think that if it's not specifically job related and it didn't come from a job, then it's not meaningful in the selection of career choice. But so it's all of it's the expense of career development at its very best is where do we derive our passion and energy, and where do we utilize the largest breadth of our skills, particularly those that seem easy to us, that might seem difficult to other people, and in a venue, in a place, in a community where they have like-minded people. So people also thinking about this are energized by that particular kind of service or that technical product.
Yeah. Well, you think about all the changes people have in their lives, and when manufacturing was very strong in this country, and just the line work was just starting and so forth, you had one little thing to do on that process, and that you did that all day long. You bored to tears, but that was the only job available. Now it seems to me that jobs are much more complex and bring in all these different skills and different passions. And so it pays to recognize, I think, that each one of us has a whole collection of stuff that we can bring to a job and can augment that job and go from there.
I think you're right on with the Industrial Revolution and what it did to us to narrow our focus to one or two things and to really see jobs as pieces of work.
And it's changed.
But prior to that, we had agriculture. And as a person in agriculture, as a farmer in our lives, you had to know botany.
You'd be good at everything.
You had to know soil. You had to know erosion. You had to know irrigation. You had to have mechanical ability.
You'd be a veterinarian for your animals.
You had to. So you were multifaceted then, and you utilized a much broader, and farmers today still do, a much broader skill set than we did when we went to the Industrial Revolution. So we're actually coming back to what we have lost when we moved into the Industrial Revolution. We're seeing ourselves a bit differently as possibly very talented and skilled in multiple areas, and how do we combine that is the challenge.
And I think that also helps us create more interesting, complex jobs, which produce more ideas and wonder about our lives and so forth.
It does. I would say this to anybody who wants to do anything in terms of career development. Look at your skills, and people are not going to think that they have any. So I'm going to give you one quick tip. That in the center of an 8x10 piece of paper, draw a column. And in that column, put ing words. So if you're good at teaching, it doesn't matter what kind of teaching. If you're good at reading, if you're good at manipulating objects, fixing, whatever word comes in with an ing, put those in the center. Those are core skills. It should take up at least a page. If you don't have a page, you're not thinking hard enough, because I know you've got at least 700 skills. And so the things that are repetitive or said differently, that are about maybe the same thing, you start clustering those skills, and they come in categories. And sometimes when you cluster skill, you can look at that cluster of skills: writing, editing, reading, proofreading, that kind of thing. You can see, you can start seeing a cluster of things that might be about specific kinds of work-related fields. But there'll be multiple clusters of these skills that come together to create a possible future. So that's one very distinct way for people to look at it. And I'll give one other big tip. If you're job hunting, why not look for a job you want versus a job that's available? And what we do in this culture is we open up the newspaper or we go to a website and we say, what's open? But what we know about that is that most jobs are in the hidden job market. So they haven't hit the light of day yet, and people know that these positions are coming available. So if you look around your community and you drive through with a person in the other seat, so you'll be safe, you say, oh, that's construction. I like construction. Write that down on a piece of paper. Oh, that's a bank. I like banking. Write that down on a piece of paper. Oh, I like education. That's a school. Write down schools on the thing. So you go and you identify the kinds of things that you might be interested in, and you put them on a piece of paper, and then you put them in priority order. And if the thing that comes up at the top of it is that public works, because you saw people working on roads and bridges and things like that, and that was what was fascinating to you, then you start looking at public works related. Who gets employed? How do people get employed? What are the job titles in this particular industry, this area? Who do I need to talk to? And you just do an information interview to figure it out. And you go to somebody in public works and you say, so what kinds of jobs are here?
Yeah, good ideas. Thank you so much.
It's a delight, Lynn. Thank you.
And we thank you all for watching. You've been watching Neighbor to Neighbor. We've been here with A Villars talking about career development. My name is Lynn Corum, and we'd like to thank our sponsors, Stacy Subaru, Wyndham World Affairs Council, Media Room Productions. And give us any questions or comments you would like to have us at our website, neighbortoneighbor@comcast.net. And we'll see you on our next show.